Hey, everybody. This is Nik and Adinah Johnson, and welcome to part 2 of Love and Respect. We are happy that you're here. Here's the book. We will also, I guess I should just hold it up a little bit better. Okay, so this is part of a playlist, so if you didn't get part 1, you can always go back and look at part 1 if you want to get current. Also, we'll have the links to the actual book that we're using and the workbook down in the comments below, because there are several versions of this book. We want to make sure that we're all on the same page as we go through this. First, from top, we'd like to ask you to subscribe if you have not subscribed, and also to give us a like. Also, if you know any other couples who would find value in this series, please feel free to share it with them by way of just sending them the link or sharing it on your Facebook or social media pages.
Yeah, okay? Absolutely. We have quite a few really good subscribers, and I should probably shout out some subscribers that always share.
Sure.
Okay, I know Jared Johnson. He is wonderful. He's a subscriber that we love, and he always shares us on Facebook.
Mm-hmm. So. Yes, shout outs to Mr. Jared. Thank you so much. Yeah. All right. So we're going to go ahead and dive into chapter 2, and chapter 2 is all about communication, correct?
All about communication. Right. And do you want me to go ahead and get going?
Yes, ma'am.
Because the important part that they were saying about communication, he was basically saying that women... And we talked a little bit about this in the first video, where it talks about women hear, and we speak in pink is what he calls it. Mm-hmm. And men hear and speak in blue. Mm-hmm. And so oftentimes as women, we understand what another woman is saying, just sometimes by the look, just by the interactions that we have, just knowing, okay, I know that a woman, feels this way. And you do the same thing with guys, mm-hmm. where you just kind of connect and get it, what guys are saying, thinking, and feeling. Mm-hmm. So it's not wrong. It's just different. And so I think it's so important for us to recognize that individuals are not wrong for hearing things or thinking things the way they do, but it's just different.
Yeah, we communicate in very different ways. And I give the example of the way me and my oldest boy will communicate via text. And I've always found out that I can send him a text, and it will literally be me sending him a text saying, "You good?" He'll respond back, Yep. My response will be, "I." And that's it. That's our whole communication right there. I've made sure that he's all right. He's let me know he's all right. And basically I told him that I'll see you later. It's very different communication style when it comes to a man and a woman. And that's just an example of the differences that we have.
Yeah, because I never text him, "You good?" The only 2 words I may say to him is "love you."
Love you.
But just to text him, no.
Yeah, if I ever heard from him, I'd be like, "You good?" I'm like, "Yes, sir." "All right." Yeah, I might be like, "Love you."
And I'm usually like, "I haven't talked to you in a minute. Where are you? What's going on?" But call me, that type of stuff.
Hey,
he's 23, so
if he can respond, he all right. So that's it. That's it. So we have to be able to.
In somebody's trunk.
If he's in somebody's trunk and he's texting me and he's not saying send help or maybe called 911. That's maybe a problem.
Maybe he's liking it. Who knows?
Hey, you never know. Hey, good times. Okay. So communicate this in Deciphering the Code. All right. So we're going to get started. We have a few questions that I guess more thought-provoking questions that we're going to cover here. We're not going to go through all of them.
Yeah.
But definitely, as we go through them, we'll put some context around them.
Definitely. Now, the first one, it says, how often does your spouse communicate in code that is hard to decipher or understand? I put seldom, because I think we've been together so long, we understand each other's codes and how we communicate, and we've worked really hard to understand that.
Yeah.
Even though we can, that's not to say we're exempt from the crazy cycle, because we can get into the crazy cycle. It happens.
Yeah, and I think it's important also, the more that you try to acknowledge when the crazy cycle will start and when you're in it, to be able to get out of it.
Right.
Or not get into it at all.
Yeah.
Because when there are certain things that are triggers for you that will put you into that crazy cycle, you're like, okay, I won't stop. I recall as we started trying to become more in tune with each other in our relationship, I remember there would be times, and I remember this vividly, we could be at the grocery store. Because way back when it used to be a big deal, we would get together and go to the grocery store after work. Do you remember that? We would go and literally shop together. I don't know.
I have not shopped at the grocery store
with me in a long time.
10 years. In about 10 years, you have not been to the grocery store. That's not true, because you normally come in the grocery store and bring the kids, but we don't sit there and push our buggy and look into each other's eyes like we used to.
And collect samples.
Yeah.
Never. Yeah, we don't do that. But I can recall situations where if I feel like I was getting irritated or something, like I remember we were being out shopping, I remember getting irritated. I was like, we got to go.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, maybe somebody bumped me or whatever. I was like,
something
triggered me.
Yeah.
I was like, you know what? I was like, I need to go because I feel myself getting more agitated, and usually you always hurt the ones who's the closest to you.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to do that. So we would literally be like, all right, shopping trip over, let's go. And,
we would leave whatever groceries we had picked up, and it's like, well, we'll just walk out the store, because it was getting kind of frustrating at the time. And I usually could feel it too, whatever was happening with you, and I think vice versa. You normally can pick up on what's happening with me and kind of sense that something's happening. And I think it's so important that we communicate. Like even now, we start to get agitated or something happens while we're in public. We kind of just say, I need a minute. Something's happening.
There's a certain amount of accountability that we all have for our emotions. So we need to be able to just say, hey, you know what? I'm getting into I'm not in a good space right now.
Yeah.
And, we step away or disengage just for a little bit and let's come back, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever.
Now, this is some questions, and this is in Appendix A of the actual book, not the workbook, but some ways to get out of the crazy cycle. And the first question is what I'm about to say or do to feel unloving, or going to do feel unloving to her. So you have to ask yourself if what you're going to do will maybe feel unloving to your spouse, and whatever it is, whether it's yell at them or get loud with them or whatever the case may be. And then for the wife, it's important to say, is what I'm about to do or say going to feel disrespectful to him? So it's so important that you gauge yourself on those questions. And I think oftentimes if we take a moment and ask ourselves those questions, we could possibly stop the crazy cycle from happening.
Yeah, that is just, once again, taking ownership of our actions and our emotions, because we can't necessarily say something is somebody else's fault. Like, you made me do this, because you did something. You have to be willing to take the ownership. So before we do something unloving or something that is disrespectful, we need to be willing to just look at it and say, okay, is this going to benefit my marriage or not, in my relationship? Yeah.
Let me give another point that was made in Appendix A. Is the best way to motivate her is by meeting her need for love. And the best way to motivate him is by meeting his need for love. And that brings me to another video that I'm going to do very soon. And the thing that I always like to say, it's motivation, not manipulating. I'm not manipulating you to do anything. I am motivating you, when we're talking about love and respect, to love me as I respect you.
Yeah. And it's almost like I think about, deposits and withdrawals.
Yeah.
At some point, we have to keep giving that love or giving that respect so that in turn we can withdraw and get that love or that respect back. So we just really want to make sure to do that. And then you have to think about, okay, if I'm not making any deposits, should I really expect to be able to make a withdrawal?
Right. Okay, and question 5, it just talks about flipping the light switch on and off. And we talked about that in the first video, how oftentimes individuals don't stop the crazy cycle, they continue it. And we would never do that with the light switch. If we flipped the light switch and it didn't come on, we would ask ourselves, well, what's the problem? And then we would try to troubleshoot it.
Yeah. And I think they give some scenarios as far as crazy cycle behaviors in the book. And it goes to a couple of the questions that are in the front. They talk about, one is the work trip. As far as all you want me for is sex, and basically put some kind of the backstory to that. There's a gentleman who was out traveling. His wife was at home, with the kids and whatnot. He came home early expecting that his wife would be really excited to see him, but he was not welcomed that way.
Yeah.
His wife, basically welcomed him by saying, "What are you doing here early?" Then she went to tell him about, several things that had gone on as far as when it comes to the kids. Also, how she wanted to get tea with her sister. And there were several things where they were unhappy, or he was unhappy, because he didn't necessarily receive the type of welcome that he was hoping to get. So in that particular aspect, he felt disrespected. And he honestly just told her, hey, am I just a meal ticket for you? And in turn, the wife felt like she was nothing for him but just a means to have sex. So you really want to escape those type of crazy cycle situations.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's important. And that wasn't the case, but because the unloving, disrespectful, they just went into the crazy cycle. And if we just read the story, it did not seem disrespectful, but I think both of us could understand that person's point of view. And I think it's so important for us to talk about when we're not in a crazy cycle, how to avoid it or how to get out of a crazy cycle, because again, it can happen to all of us. And so it's so important for individuals to say, hey, when I feel unloved or you feel disrespected, we could do X, Y, Z. And they gave a lot of examples in the book. One is, saying, do you really want to go on this crazy cycle? So I think you have to watch how you say it or code how you say it or how you communicate it. Because if you say, do you really want to get on this crazy cycle, someone could see that as a threat as well.
Like, you want to put them up? Is that basically, like...
So
you want to do that?
Are you threatening me?
Yeah. And
you plotting on me, boy?
Yeah, you really don't want that. But one thing that we have to say is by saying, hey, that I don't feel loved or I don't feel respected, it takes a certain amount of vulnerability.
Yeah.
And sometimes individuals don't want to share that they are hurt, that they're not feeling loved, or that they're not feeling respected.
Yeah.
Well, the important thing that we all need to keep in mind is that desire is placed in us for a reason.
Yeah.
And we will desire to have that need be met. The best place for that need to be met is within the confines of your marriage.
Yeah.
But what happens at times is that when that need is not met, individuals will go other places to get that need met.
Yeah.
Which is basically a slippery slope where at that particular point, you can start to let Satan have a foothold in your relationship. And, you find yourself actually going outside of your marriage to get your needs met.
Yeah.
And
whether it's an emotional affair or an actual physical affair, it can happen. And I've heard it happen with men and women. It's not just one subsect of community that do that.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's so important to understand that. And I think you made a very valid point earlier when we talked about this, is that it's so important that you communicate to your spouse when those things are happening. That way, before they happen. And even if you feel yourself trying to talk extra time to somebody else or sharing intimate details and feelings with someone, it's so important that you recognize that and have a conversation with your spouse and do what it takes to correct it.
Yeah, because nobody wants to have the conversation going to their wife, hey, I don't feel respected. I'm sure there's not a wife who wants to go to her husband and says, I don't feel loved. But at the same time, it's better to have that conversation now than have a different type of conversation later on when you've gone someplace else to get that need met.
Yeah. Question number 11, scientific research confirms the centrality of love and respect in the book, and that's pages 35 through 37. And it has having enough money, attending church regularly, a loving, respectful tone in their conversation, or spend enough time together. And the answer for that is C.
A loving tone.
Yep, a loving, respectful tone in communication. And that's so important.
It's important for us to understand that we can say anything, but it's just the way that we say it.
Yeah.
We really have to be mindful in the way that we deliver it. So I think oftentimes in the midst of emotions, sometimes we're not able to communicate in an effective way.
Yeah.
And we communicate emotionally, and it's not beneficial. So what we have to be able to do, I guess a couple things, is to be able to, one, understand once we get to a point emotionally where we can't communicate effectively.
Right.
And once we're in the midst of that, still trying to speak in goodwill.
Yeah.
And understand that you just make the situation worse when we are not communicating effectively in the midst of the crazy cycle. Because on top of being in this crazy cycle, now in the middle of it, you're having these less than beneficial conversations.
Right. And talk about what goodwill is. Give a definition of goodwill and how you really should come in a relationship or come in communication with your partner with goodwill.
As far as goodwill is basically the desire to interact or engage with your spouse with the whole purpose of having a positive connection or interaction.
Yeah.
You know, all the things and all our communication should be in goodwill. Is when you have the best intentions. Most of the time when we interact with our spouses, we don't have any, malice.
Malice, yeah.
And we've been around each other for a while. Yeah.
I can read
you go on my thoughts. She completes my sentences. You don't have malice. And
or contempt. That's a big one, contempt, and that's, I think most men want to make sure their wife have respect for them and don't have contempt for them, because if you have a contempt for your spouse, that's just disrespect.
Yeah. And if you look at it, and this goes on to question 14, but I think it's appropriate since you gave kind of the segue. Mm-hmm. It talks about how men interpret criticism as contempt. Right. And how women feel silence as hostility. Right. So oftentimes as a man, if I shut down and I don't say anything, that's actually creating a hostile environment for my spouse, because really love isn't, for the most part, there's a physical aspect, but there's also, the emotional aspect of love and communicating that. And when we struggle to, say that and articulate it, it can basically make our spouses feel unloved. Yeah. And then once again, it's that cycle where if they don't feel loved, it's going to be difficult for them to respect you as a husband.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so important.
Did we get deep enough into the filters and the ear?
The pink ear and the blue. Yeah, that's what I was wondering, because I was just thinking about that, and it's right here.
Mm-hmm. Hearing aids.
Yeah. That part. Emerson gives valuable insight of just how pink and blue sunglasses and hearing aids work that can affect a marriage. And it asks, and this is question 14, the one that you were just on, but it says list at least 3 statements or phrases that stand out for you from the pink or blue viewpoint. Mm-hmm. So, and also those questions are in the back of the book under the appendix, because they give you a bit of a cheat sheet. Mm-hmm. And so it's so important to understand that, to have those conversations and to have those things to lighten up the relationship and to get out of the crazy cycle. And so when it happens, one of the things it says that you can say is, we're just 2 hamsters on the crazy cycle. And that kind of, gives a chuckle and kind of takes you out of that, angst that you're having. Mm-hmm. And it says, are we trying to take a spin on the crazy cycle? Mm-hmm. And it says, are we trying a new record on the crazy cycle? So just different ways to kind of remind your spouse that this can turn into something that's not necessary. And again, pink and blue, pink, blue sunglasses, hearing aids is not wrong. It's just different. We interact different. We really we want individuals or our spouse to understand how we feel about a situation. But I think when we try hard, we can easily explain it if the other person is willing to listen. And I think one phrase that we've acknowledged that I say to you a lot of times is, help me to understand, because I don't quite understand what you're saying. And what did you say that was very much like, but the other way is annoying to you?
Oh, our daughter has a thing now who at the time of this recording is 6 years old. She says, that don't make no sense. That's just her thing. That don't make no sense. So as hearing her say that, I was like, okay, that doesn't make sense to her because she does not understand it. So basically it is a mature way of saying that don't make no sense. Right. But you say it in a very non-combative way. Help me to understand. Because to you, it doesn't make sense. Yeah. But you have the goodwill and wanting to be open to understanding what it is and what that particular person's viewpoint is.
Yeah.
So it just really opens you up for that.
And just because I cannot decipher the blue hearing aid, the blue code that you have at that time, doesn't mean that I don't have goodwill or I don't want to understand. It just means I don't understand it and it's different at that time. So oftentimes as spouses, we have to love each other enough to say, hey, I don't understand that. Please help me to understand from your viewpoint. Because I don't see it as disrespectful if XYZ happens. You may. Or I don't see it as unloving if this happens, but you may. So help me to understand why that is disrespectful. And we've had to do that over the years.
Yeah, and I think that's also a good, if I piggyback on that, as far as we don't have to understand why something makes our wives feel unloved or why it makes a husband feel disrespected.
Right.
We just have to understand that it does. Okay, so if I don't, like for instance, I know one thing that you desire for us to do is when you cook, is that first of all, once you call us to come for dinner, is not to tarry in coming to eat.
Yeah.
We need to come there and eat, and also while we're eating, we need to express our appreciation for it.
Yeah.
And I know it is, and some people could say, "Well, I need to let you know I appreciate it because if you come back and the place clean, that mean I like it."
That sounds like your dad.
I'll deal with her after this video pops.
I love my father-in-law, but it does sound like him, does it not?
He is the president of the Clean Plate Crew.
Yeah, but he'll tell you. I don't have to tell you thank you. Or, I mean, he does, but
he will leave a clean plate.
Yeah.
But to me, that could be the interpretation of me letting you know I appreciate it is by eating it all.
Yeah.
But you no, I would like for you to let me know. First of all, let me know what you thought about it, and so. I do it because I know that makes you feel loved. So I just do it. So like I said before, as a husband or as a wife, we don't have to understand what makes us feel loved or feel respected as long as we get it and we try our best to do it.
Right. As long as you try your best to do what it is. Another one that I went to question number 16. And to complete this exercise, fill in the following. The next time my husband appears unloving or harsh, I will show respect by. So I'm going to ask you a question. And I try not to, but if I do not feel, if you are not appearing loving to me, how should you like for me to show you respect?
So if I am not being loving to you, how do I want you to show me respect?
And I put you on the spot and asked you that question because I think it's so important that we understand what makes our spouse happy and what makes them feel loved and respected. Because I don't have to know what makes all men feel loved and respected, but I do have to know what makes you feel respected. But I would say if I felt unloved, I think you would prefer for me to...
First of all, let me know, and like that kind of goes back to those conversations.
Yeah.
They might not be comfortable, but if you're not feeling loved, there's something that I need to do or either stop doing to make you feel that way. And I would like to know and be, in tune enough with myself to understand that, okay, I'm not feeling respected right now. Is there something I'm doing that is not loving to her that would literally make her feel the desire to respect me? So I think it's also a self-assessment that you have to do in that particular situation.
And I think for you, if I am feeling unloved, I think you would like for me to tell you, but I also think you would like for me to remain respectful.
Yeah.
And not be rude and not give you tone and attitude and face and neck and everything else. I think you would want me to just remain respectful and be consistent.
Yeah. And we talk about respect, and we need to make sure that as a whole, we as husbands are doing our best to walk in a manner and conduct ourselves in a manner where it is not difficult for our wives to respect us.
That's correct.
I constantly share this message with other men that, we want to be in a situation where our wives and our children are happy and proud to be able to say that we are their father, that we are, a wife can say that, you're her husband. So we want to make sure to be mindful of that. We're not necessarily, the expectation should not be unconditional respect, because you cannot be respectful to disrespectful behavior.
Right.
So we want to be mindful
Or
of that.
unloving behavior either.
Yeah, that's true. You can't, it's difficult to love unloving behavior. But at the same time, we have to understand that, through our desire to have a better relationship, we can continue to try to be loving. We can try to be respectful and hope that through our actions that other person will say, you know what? I think I could be a little bit more loving. I can be a little more respectful.
Right. That's a good point. So I know we got to wrap this one up because I don't want to go too far over time. But I do want to say once again that hearing things from the pink or blue perspective, and he just says pink or blue perspective, it's pink for women and blue for guys. But I think to hear things in that perspective, it's not wrong. It's just different.
Yeah.
And I think part of deciphering the code and communicating effectively is when things are not heated to help, for your spouse to help you to understand why it's disrespectful or help you to understand why it is unloving when something happens.
Yep. It once again it boils back to that communication, and also, as you mentioned before, it's important as far as that tone. I can tell you that you're hurting me, but if my tone is not very loving, it's somewhat hard to receive that.
Yeah.
Or if the tone is not respectful, it's hard to receive that. So we want to make sure in what we're saying that we do have the appropriate tone when it comes to it.
That's a good point.
Use the inside voice.
Yeah.
You gotta do that. So
And baby talk.
and baby dog. So we're gonna get ready to wrap this up. If at the top of the video you didn't subscribe, this is a great time to do so.
Yeah.
Also, if you're on social media, please feel free to share this. Also, comment down in the bottom. Also, we're still open to feedback and questions that you may have for us. So please feel free to contact us however you prefer, whether email or across social media.
And we're putting the link for the book.
Yes, down in the comments. So you can feel free to get that as well. So that being said, this is Nik. I got to do the point. This is Nik Johnson. This is Adinah Johnson. Take care of yourselves and keep loving one another.
Bye.